We are live. Welcome back to another episode of the Eagles Power Hour. I am your host, as always, Kylor Neal. Rusty is out saving some people from fire, so he is busy. But we got a lot of things to cover. Actually, it's not even that much. Basketball season is completely over. We already dove into a lot of the things that's happening with the men's basketball program, with David Riley really having to grab a whole bunch of different players and try and see if we can keep some. Who are we going to get from the portal ourselves? So David Riley's got his hands cut out for him, but we're going to have him on the podcast in the near future. I'll at least say that he is willing to jump on our podcast to talk about everything that's going on. But right now, we are not a priority and we shouldn't be, just because he's got a lot on his plate and he needs to capitalize on this really short turnaround time. Having 7 players in the transfer portal is difficult for any single team. So he's got a lot to work out, but we're going to be happy to have him on whenever he gets the opportunity. But we got some football to talk about. This is still football season. It's so weird. It's spring and it's towards the end of spring. Easter just happened and we have football. We still have football to talk about. We are getting really close to the playoffs. It's weird because playoffs are going to start in April. And guess what? We normally start in November. It's normally cold weather. It's gonna be nice and hot. It's gonna be a weird, interesting time. But yeah, so Eastern Washington, we took on UC Davis this last weekend. Now UC Davis was ranked number 9 in basically the official committee's bracket. So this is their polls that they put out. They rank their top 10 teams. These are all teams that they think we're going to be the top 10 in the playoffs. If you are ranked in the top 10 in the committee's eyes, you are going to be in the playoffs as long as you continue to win. Well, UC Davis was ranked number 9. And I mean, when you look at the resume, I had no arguments for it. They should have been ranked above Eastern Washington until Eastern Washington proved it, which they totally did this last Saturday, and we will recap the game. But UC Davis coming into this game, they had a very close win again, or a very close loss against Weber. Weber is their tied for 5th team in the committee's eyes. They're the number 2 team in the stats poll, I believe. But they had a very, very close loss against Weber, which they were kind of controlling most of the game. So UC Davis was number 9 in the committee's eyes. They were most likely going to be able to go to the playoffs if they got past the hurdle that was Eastern Washington. And Eastern Washington was already on their last line. If they wanted a chance at the playoffs, they had to go in this game. They had to prove that they wanted it. And Eastern Washington wanted it. I mean, I know UC Davis wanted it too, and I really hate that notion, this team wanted it more than the other. They both want it. It's just one team played better than the other on the game the day that the game was there. I'm not even going to say Eastern Washington's a better team than UC Davis right now. I mean, they kind of proved it, but UC Davis is a very good team. And it's not to say maybe if this game wasn't played the week prior, or next week, maybe UC Davis could have won. That is the thing. But Eastern Washington came into Davis, California, and we won. The score was 32-22. And I will be honest with you guys, this wasn't that close of a game. It definitely did not feel like a 10-point game. I mean, Eastern Washington started with a 16-0 lead at halftime. Then UC Davis kind of clawed back in the third quarter, where they scored 15 points in the third quarter, which is pretty impressive. But that still only put it within one possession game. And then, of course, Eastern Washington scored a couple times in the fourth quarter, and they ended 32-10 for a 10-point win. The offense looked really good because UC Davis is a very strong defense. The defense is what I was pretty proud of. Eastern Washington right now ranks in the Big Sky like number 2 or number 3 in total offense, number 2 in scoring defense, which means, we are behind Weber in defense with the Big Sky. UC Davis is a very strong offensive team. We were able to hold them to, 397 yards, which that's not amazing numbers, but that's their total yards. We were able to hold them under 400. The cool thing was we were able to hold them to 22 points. And that's what really matters in my eyes. Are you able to control the game and not let the other team score? If you're willing to keep a team under 22, 24 points a game, well, if you're Eastern Washington, you have a pretty good chance to to win at the end of the day. And I think Eastern Washington, this is one of their better scoring defenses that we've had in the last 10 years. 2010 was better, 2018 was better. But we're holding teams at under 23 points a game. We're also scoring 40-something points a game. So if we can continue to do that, we should be able to make a deep run in the playoffs as long as we get over the hurdle that is Idaho. But let's break down a little bit more of the game. Another interception was thrown. So Eric Berrier now has 6 or 7 on the season. But he threw 30 for 41, 392 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. And when you look at this game, Eric Berrier, he's so fun to watch. We have never had a true quarterback like this. Now, some people compare him to Vernon Adams. I don't think that's a good comparison. There are 2 different quarterbacks. Vernon Adams would, scramble in the pocket just as good as almost anyone. But his arm was his main playmaking ability. Eric Berrier, it is his legs. I mean, he still has a very strong arm. He is still a very good thrower. But the ability to extend plays with his legs is second to none. I don't think I've ever seen anyone do what he's able to do. I mean, there were so many times in this game where the defensive line for UC Davis was able to get through our offensive line, and they put Eric Berrier in horrible situations. But, he either felt them breathing right on his, left shoulder or something. He was always able to spin out, run about 10 yards away from the, in the backfield, able to scramble, able to get down the field. I think he had, over 40 yards rushing. But I would imagine if you just only took his yards from scrambling in the pocket, he ran well over 150 yards this last weekend. It was impressive to watch. I mean, you could just see the frustration in UC Davis's line's eyes, because they get through our offensive line. They actually played really good against our offensive line. They were getting through. It almost seemed like at will, but none of them could catch Eric Berrier. Even if they were hands on a shoulder, they could not catch Eric Berrier. It was impressive watching him extend those plays. And then, of course, Limu Jones, I mean, one hell of a game, 10 receptions, 154 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's going to be our player of the game right now. Limu Jones, I mean, he is a physical threat. I mean, if you are in the FCS, good luck trying to guard this kid as a wide receiver. He is 6'5", 220, 225, something around there. I mean, how many wide receivers are that big of a target? And, he's had 40 receptions in 5 games, 580 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, his average, yards per reception is almost 15 yards. He's just a huge target. And he can run. He's fast. It's not like he's not fast either. He's had a 77-yard passing, reception this year. He is an absolute beast. And last year, he had 24 receptions, 577 yards, 24 yards a reception. It is pretty impressive to see what this kid is able to do. But we were out Andrew Boston this last game. Andrew Boston's definitely a playmaker, and he takes more DBs off the field. So hopefully Andrew Boston's back in this next game. But yeah, hats off to Eastern Washington versus UC Davis game, because this was a game that we needed to win if we wanted any shot at the playoffs. This is a game that Eastern Washington needed to win. And you know what? We totally did. So I was really happy watching how we played. We came in there. We really showed no doubt. We are the better team. And, it kept our playoff hopes alive. The defense played outstanding. UC Davis is a strong team. Hunter Rodriguez threw only 50%, 116 yards, and a touchdown. Hunter Rodriguez is an athlete too, so it was pretty good seeing how he was able to be contained. Our defensive line just looks incredible. I'm really happy with how our defensive line is playing, because they were one of the question marks I had in the preseason, and they continue to do a good job containing people. They continue to do a good job doing what they need to do to stop the run. UC Davis was without Alonzo Gilliam, and that is probably a difference maker. I'm going to be honest with you. Gilliam is such a stud. And if he was in the game, maybe they're able to pull it off. Maybe they're able to make it a little closer. I mean, as a rushing team, they did not run the ball bad. I mean, they had 42 carries, 218 yards, and a touchdown. they didn't run the ball bad, and they had what 6, 7 different people that actually grab the ball and try to run it. So yeah, they are a solid team, and if Alonzo Gilliam was there, this could have been a different game. I'm just going to be honest with you, but he wasn't, and you play with who's in front of you, and also Andrew Boston wasn't in the game for us. So there are differences, but yeah, we went to UC Davis. Unfortunately for UC Davis, we ended their whole season because Cal Poly opted out after Eastern Washington dethroned them after that 62-10 win. We made them quit their season, and UC Davis was supposed to play Cal Poly this weekend, but since Cal Poly canceled, UC Davis has no more games. So Eastern Washington now in the last 2 weeks has ended 2-team seasons. UC Davis has no chance for the playoffs at 3-2. And without that extra game, they won't be able to get to 4-2. So unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, Eastern Washington has already ended 2 seasons this year. Hopefully we can end Idaho's this weekend, and then in the playoffs end a couple more. That's the goal. That's what we're going to do. But let's dive into this Idaho versus Eastern Washington game. The last time we met, actually the last 2 times we met, they've been close games. It's been unfortunate how it's ended on the Eastern Washington side. Idaho may have this stylistic matchup that can compete with Eastern Washington. Now, when we came in there in the very beginning of the year, Eastern Washington lost 21-28 at the Kibbe Dome. And this was a crazy game. For one, Coach Best wasn't even available. He had COVID. He was not even able to travel with the game. He was not a head coach during this game. That could have been a difference maker. Andrew Boston was not on the field. And Idaho's defensive backs are horrible. So there's some opportunities, some missed opportunities where maybe the first game we didn't have everyone we should have. Maybe that could have been the difference maker. But also, Idaho was just more physical than us. If you watch that game, there wasn't any part of the game where I was like, man, Eastern Washington, we look like we're going to be able to pull this out. In the first half, sure, we looked like a decent team, and it was, tied going into halftime. The second half, I think Idaho just controlled us. Actually, they beat us defensively. They were more physical. Now, yes, there was that missed field goal. Yes, there was that amazing throw with seconds left from, Mike Beaudry in the end zone when it was, if maybe Eastern Washington was up by 3 with that missed field goal, maybe they just try and set up a field goal to go for the tie. But since it was tied, they could risk it. They had nothing to lose. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't the best game for Eastern Washington. Eric Berrier, he overthrew a couple players, but again, this was the first game. We didn't think we were going to be 100% perfect, but again, Idaho, they out-physicaled us. Hatton, he absolutely controlled us. He had 6 receptions, 138 yards, a touchdown. This was a difficult game, but now we're going to Roos Field. Idaho is like 1-12 on the road since they joined the Big Sky. Now, of course, they've had some FBS games in there like Penn State and some of these other big programs where, yeah, they weren't going to win. And my metrics are judged off of that, but they have not been a good road team. Since they've dropped down, the only game they have won is NAU, and that was in 2019. That's that same NAU team we destroyed by like 105. Of course, I'm exaggerating, but it was not a close game. And Idaho went to NAU, and they had what was like one of those old school Eastern Washington shootouts. It's kind of like even the Idaho State game versus Eastern Washington this year. Besides, it wasn't a 40-point game. It was like a 60-point game, overtime. It was crazy. You saw a little Mason Petrino throw 7 touchdowns or something ridiculous. But that's the only game that they have won on the road. Last time they came to Eastern Washington, we absolutely tore them up. For some reason, and maybe it's just the matchups that they've had, they just do not play well on the road. And I don't know what it is. This year, of course, they have not won a road game. They've also never played outside this year. So this is going to be interesting. This is their first game they're playing outside. I kind of wish it was in the fall where, they played in the dome now 4 times. Kind of wish it was in the fall to where they wouldn't be able to prep for the outside elements or something like that. But you know what? We're going to have probably good weather. I don't think the weather is going to be too much of a factor. But yeah, we really need to play better. Some of the things that we really need to do, we need to do a better job guarding Eric Berrier this week. Now, yes, I just gave him so many props that basically saying, he's untouchable once he escapes the pocket. He can feel people once they're breathing down his neck. The difference is Idaho's defensive line. They are much more physical than any of the teams we played so far this year. They're also more athletic. This is one of their best. I'm going to say it is their best positions group on their whole roster. It's their defensive line. They are doing a very good job getting to quarterbacks, stopping the run. This is the whole soul of their defense. Without the defensive line, Idaho's getting beat every single week by 17 points. That's just kind of my assumption. But their defensive line can for sure keep Idaho in this game. Eric Berrier is the fastest guy on the field. He's going to be the fastest guy on the field. But if you are scrambling 10 yards back from basically the line of scrimmage, well, these defensive linemen that Idaho have, they're smart. They can cut off the field. They can get to Eric Berrier. They can make him throw inaccurate. And we kind of saw that the first game, 32, 57, 339 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. He missed some throws. Now, there was quite a bit of drops. There was also some touchdown drops. Hopefully, it seems like every week we are cleaning that up, and we really can't afford to have this many drops our second game versus Idaho. But yeah, it's going to be interesting if we can contain the defensive line from Idaho a little bit better. Eastern Washington has a fairly good shot to win this game. I don't know who's going to be the quarterback. I think it's Nicole Nair or Nicole something. I definitely mispronounce that because I've been listening to Tubbs at the Club for the last 3 years, and they have been pronouncing it wrong until just this season. So I apologize, but he's their third string quarterback. I think Mike Beaudry is still injured. CJ Jordan, who's, man, I want to give my hats off to this kid, and I'm kind of bummed Eastern Washington didn't grab him. I don't know if we recruited him. I don't know what happened, but CJ Jordan is an absolute stud. He's a freshman quarterback. He's Vernon Adams-esque in the terms of his scrambling ability. He doesn't have the legs quite like Eric Berrier, but he's a total package quarterback, and he could be the future of Idaho. He can change this offensive scheme that Idaho has. And he was injured a couple games ago. He's a true freshman, and he got some playing time. He looked good until he was, injured in the game. I think it was a knee, which is a little terrifying because he already had some injury problems in high school, and that's kind of the reason why he did not go P5. I mean, we'll see if he can get healthy. That's one of the issues with this spring football season. Do you have enough time to recoup before the fall? Because I think if he is not injured, he's probably the starter in the fall. But yeah, let's go through some offensive, defensive stats overall for these two teams so we can compare. So the scoring offense for Eastern Washington is 41 points per game. Idaho, 25 points a game. We've had 27 total touchdowns to their 12. Now, of course, we have played one more game than them, but overall, offensively, we are the much better team. Scoring defense, this is where it's going to potentially surprise you guys. Scoring defense, we are number 2 in the Big Sky, 23 points per game. Idaho is giving up 26 points per game. Idaho is actually scoring less than they're giving up. They have a negative scoring margin. Eastern Washington has a very positive scoring margin, so that is promising for us. Oh, sorry, my laptop got unplugged. Had to plug it back in, or else this podcast would have died. So, Idaho has given up 14 touchdowns. Eastern Washington has given up 15. So it's nothing, too crazy, but we've also played one more game than them. Total offense, of course, 575 yards compared to Idaho's 396. Total defense, Eastern Washington ranks number 3. Idaho ranks number 7. So even in total defense, we are the much better defensive team this year. We are giving up 370 yards a game, and we've played some of the better offenses like UC Davis, like UC Davis, Idaho State. I guess Idaho's in the middle of the pack, so that doesn't matter. But those are 2 of the top 3 offenses outside of Eastern Washington. It's Idaho State and UC Davis. And guess what? We have 2 wins over them. Here is where, Idaho is definitely the best. And it is their defensive line. Rushing defense, Idaho, 106 yards per game. They're only giving up an average of 3.2 yards a game. per rush. Eastern Washington, though, is not that far behind. Our defensive line is playing lights out. I'm really impressed by our defensive line as well. So we are giving up 3.6 yards, 135 yards a game. And then you look at, the rushing offense. Well, Eastern Washington's rushing 172 yards a game. Idaho's only rushing 137. Passing offense, of course, Eastern Washington, 402. Idaho, 259. Pass defense, Eastern Washington only giving up 234 yards. Idaho is giving up 359. Idaho is giving up 9 yards per pass attempt. When you're looking at it on paper, this should be a no-brainer. Eastern Washington should win. But they do have that defensive line that can cause some mishaps for Eric Berrier. They have a very, very strong defensive line. Their front seven is impeccable. Their linebacking group is amazing too. The only thing that's really struggling on Idaho's side is their defensive backs. And right now they are the worst in the Big Sky. Can Eastern Washington capitalize? I hope so. It's looking promising, especially when you go down and, look at really the numbers of kind of the individual statistics. So, of course, you're looking at Idaho. They have the worst defensive backs in the whole Big Sky. Eric Berrier is, of course, the number one passing option. Then receptions. I mean, you have 3 of the top 5 receivers in the league. Not in the league, in the Big Sky. So, receiving yards a game. You have Tanner Connor from Idaho State. He is having a phenomenal year. 387 yards, 3 touchdowns, 117 yards a game. But then you have Limu Jones, 116 yards a game. Then you have Freddie Roberson, 83 yards a game. Andrew Boston, 72 yards a game. And he's only played 4 games. We have 3 of the top 5 receivers in the Big Sky. I know I was on the Tubs at the Club, and, Chris Hammond was like, yeah, but I don't think the Eastern Washington wide receivers are that good. They are that good. They just have made some mental mistakes. I think this wide receivers group is definitely the most athletic group we've ever had, the most talented group we've ever had. Are they the best? No. I don't think we will ever get another wide receiver group that is Cooper Kupp, Kendrick Bourne, and Shaq Hill. Plus you have Simba Webster. He was a 5th guy and he's still in the NFL. But it's going to take a lot to beat that class. But in terms of pure talent, pure athleticism, this is one of the best wide receiver groups we have. And also they're a mismatch for everyone. They're all big. They're 6'2" to 6'5". For the FCS, especially when you have, you're looking at DBs on paper, they're 5'10" now because, they need to be a little faster. Our wide receivers are fast. Our wide receivers are huge compared to really most of the league. We are a mismatch on paper. The only thing we need to do is keep our eyes on the ball. A lot of the times what we're doing is, and you can see it, they are more concerned with who's right behind them, who's going to potentially tackle them, and then they drop. Also, what I've noticed is Eric Berrier may throw the fastest ball in the Big Sky. I mean, it may just be really hard because there's also been a couple interceptions that he's thrown, potential interceptions, because the other team can't catch the ball either. It's bouncing right off their hands. There's been a couple throws to our wide receivers where it's so fast. He throws such a fast bullet that, bounces off their head before the wide receivers can even close their hands. But we need to do a better job every single week, though. I can see our wide receivers are improving. They are dropping less. They are looking much better. Overall, man, on paper, this is a mismatch game for Idaho. We should win. There shouldn't be any aspects of this team where we should be concerned on if we can actually pull it out. I'll give you my game prediction at the end and the score and all of that. But let's talk a little bit about the rest of the Big Sky because I'm going to hold this to about 30-ish minutes. So of course, number 1, number 2 in the nation in the stats poll, number 5 in the nation in the committee's playoff eyes, Weber State. They're 4-0. They've had a couple close games recently, though. A Hail Mary. If you guys haven't seen that, just Google the Hail Mary Weber State versus NAU. NAU is going to win that game. And somehow Weber, who has a horrible offense, is able to throw a 50-yard bomb and catch the ball. They score the touchdown in the end zone. Hail Mary. It was very Aaron Rodgers-esque, so it was pretty cool to see. But Weber State is 4-0. Their next game is against Idaho State. Eastern Washington 4-1. We are number 2. Then you have UC Davis at 3-2. Idaho is kind of tied at 2-2. Idaho stays below 2-3. Then NAU, Southern Utah, and Cal Poly are all down at the very bottom. So what does this mean for Eastern Washington? Well, our playoff chances are still alive. There are 6 auto bids, or 6 there's quite a bit of auto bids, but there's 6 at-large bids, because the MEAC is not going to get an at-large bid because they only have 3 teams and 2 of them are not playing each other. So what does this mean for really the Big Sky? I mean, the Big Sky should get 2 teams. You look at the history, the last 3 years specifically, the Big Sky has had the most wins in the FCS playoffs. We sent the most teams to the quarterfinals last year. We sent the most teams to the semifinals last year. If you are looking at a weird season where there's no really out of conferences, you got to kind of lean to the past years for an example. Weber State is in the playoffs. I think even if they slip up, Weber State should be in the playoffs as long as they beat Idaho State. If they lose to Idaho State, they're probably best case scenario and at large, but who knows? Unless Eastern Washington loses to Idaho, then Weber State can still get the auto bid. But most likely, let's just say Weber State's in the playoffs. Idaho or Eastern Washington is in the playoffs as well, as long as we can beat Idaho. I would assume a 5-1 record would get us one of the at-larges. In the stats poll, we were number 9. I think in the committee's eyes, we're just outside the top 10. This UC Davis win was huge. It should push us right in that top 10 for the committee. We will see. It was a pretty dominating performance. Everyone else in the Big Sky, their playoff chances are pretty much gone. UC Davis, we ended their season. They're not going to be able to get in the playoffs at 3-2. Idaho, they are 2-2. Even if they win their next 2 games, I don't think they get into the playoffs. For one of the 6 at-larges, you really have to be a 1-loss team and be in the Big Sky, because the Missouri Valley most likely get in 3 teams. So 2 of them are going to be at-larges. You're going to probably have, your North Dakota or South Dakota State, and then the third one is going to be North Dakota. The CAA most likely getting 1-2. So whoever wins the auto bid, Delaware, James, Madison, the other one's getting in the playoffs for sure. JMU is the number 1 team in the committee's eyes, so they have no more games scheduled. So they should be in, even if they do not lose or win an auto bid, just because the committee's not going to drop them from 1 to 18. That makes no sense for not playing. So JMU is locked into the playoffs. Then you have teams like Richmond, undefeated. You have a, surging Villanova team. So the CAA could realistically get 1 to 2 at-larges. So now you're looking at 3 to potentially 4 of the 6 at-larges gone. Then you look at the rest of the league. Jacksonville State is playing Murray State. This is for the OVC title. Murray State is 5-0. Jacksonville is like 8-2. Jacksonville State, even if they lose, most likely in the playoffs still, because they played in the fall season. They went 3-1. Their only loss was to Florida State, and then they have a bad FBS win on their resume. I don't care if it's a bad FBS win or a good FBS win. In the committee's eyes, it's an FBS win. You are in the playoffs. With 8 wins, they'll still have the most wins in the FCS, even if they lose to the Murray State this week. So that's probably your 5th. It's either going to be there's 4 at-larges gone right now or 5. So now you have 2 left. The Big Sky most likely takes 1 as long as Eastern Washington takes care of business. Well, then you have 1 more bid left, potentially, or 0. If you have 1 more bid, then they're going to really look at potentially like the Southland, even though I think the Southland is only going to get 1 now because Nichols kind of hurt their chances when they were playing the last few weeks. So you have Sam Houston, who should get the auto bid. Then it could be a second place team from maybe the Southland. Maybe Murray State from the OVC. Like I said, if they beat Jacksonville State, Jacksonville State's in. If Jacksonville State beats Murray State is still 5-0. They have a chance to make it. There's very limited opportunities for teams to get into the playoffs. So our playoff hopes are still alive, but we really need to beat Idaho to just maintain that and really realistically lock us in. I think a win over Idaho locks us in, but Idaho, it's a mismatch on paper, but we saw they've beat us the last 2 times. Now, again, they have not played well on the road. So here is for the Kylor score prediction, and then we will end this at right around 30 minutes. Perfect timing. So score prediction. on the tubs of the clubs, I said 34-17. I think I'm going to keep it there. I think we are going to be the better team. We are playing better. They're kind of not falling apart, if you will, but they definitely don't play well on the road. Now, this is Eastern Washington. This is a close game for them. They're going to get up for this team. I know Chris Hammond was kind of saying, I think he even picked Eastern Washington to still win. I don't remember, but it was one of those things where he's like, Eastern Washington may not be as good as people are thinking they are. There was comparison on the tubs of the club that Eastern Washington was going to win 52-10. I think that was by Dallas Hammer. Brian Marceau said Eastern Washington is going to absolutely murder them too. Chris said, no, this is not the same Eastern Washington team as years past. He doesn't think we're that good. He doesn't really believe in our offense ability, it seems like that much. And he thinks Idaho has a perfect style to upset Eastern Washington. And they do with that one specific position group, their defensive line. Other than that, they have no business being in the same league as Eastern Washington, but that defensive line can cause a lot of problems for our offense. And if they are on and they're playing a phenomenal game, this game 100% could be close. I don't think they are going to be as on. I think we are going to, be able to. I think we're going to be able to disrupt Idaho's defense a little bit more. We know exactly what to expect from them now. We know how bad their DBs are and how improved our whole offense is. So I don't think they're going to be able to really move the ball as well. First, our defense, and I think offensively we will be better than we were the first game of the year. So yeah, 34-17, Eastern Washington wins. We secure our bid for the playoffs, and hopefully we are all rooting for Idaho State this weekend, because if Idaho State beats Weber State, Eastern Washington most likely gets the auto bid. And the reason is, okay, they'll both be, I guess Weber State had a cancellation game, so they will be 4-1. We will be 5-1 if it all wins. So we'll have one more win than them. But what matters in the Big Skies committee is first head-to-head. We don't play Weber. Then it will be common opponents. Well, Weber would be 3-1 versus our common opponents. Eastern Washington would be 3-0. We would be undefeated versus the common opponents. They would have a loss. Then let's say even that is a wash because they're both 3 wins. Then they look at, Sagrigan ratings? Well, the Sagrigan, we are above Weber State too, which is weird. I don't know why a conference would utilize, a rating system, an analytical system to say who is better than the other. There's a lot of good data and there's a lot of merit in it, but they also use like historic data. And, if you look at it, the Missouri Valley gets a little bit too much love. Eastern Washington in years past has gotten a little bit too much love. So it's weird that a Big Sky conference would utilize this. I would just say, hey, common opponents, what's the scoring margin between them if you are not doing a head-to-head? And Eastern Washington should still win that one. But, yeah, we are all going to root for Idaho State this week just so we can secure that automatic playoff berth. But even if Weber wins, like I think they will, I think they kind of dominate Idaho State. Well, if we take care of business, we beat Idaho, we should still be in the playoffs. That's all I have for you guys, man. Thanks for listening. Drop a like, a subscribe. You can listen to us anywhere where or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. So Apple, Spotify, Google, whatever. Also, we have YouTube. Just Google Eagles Power Hour, man. You can find all of the podcasts. You can find the YouTube. You can find us on social media. You can really do whatever you want. Here is my little name, at Kylor EPH. You can follow me. You can troll me. You can do whatever you want. That is on Twitter. But yeah, man, join the fun. Hopefully, let's get a win this weekend. And boom, go Eags.